For those who are potentially unfamiliar with Michael Chandler, Chandler's notorious for his wrestle boxing style with dynamic punching, really explosive power, very fast hands, and an ability to stop takedowns and use them when he needs. You know, he's a characteristically wrestle boxer. You know, like, this isn't a new style, but he's refined it a lot. He's very fast and athletic, and he really knows how to exploit the strengths of it and usually avoid the weaknesses of this very style. But he does have some issues, with the one being he does get caught occasionally. He has a few losses by knockout where it seems he overextends. And to be fair, he's fighting guys that also have lots of power very fast. It's bound to happen in MMA. It's not a major slight, but it can happen. And the main issue is the UFC's lightweight division is filled with people that can crack. So have to be aware of that. How would Chandler do in the UFC? Chandler has a strong Division I background in wrestling. He's a Division I All-American. He's got a long history there at the University of Mizzou, I believe. Same place I think Ben Askren went for a while, and Tyron Woodley, so pretty solid wrestling, you know? He doesn't use it in the same way either, than more like Woodley a bit, but he's, in my opinion, a more technical and dynamic striker and faster. So yeah, you could compare him more to Woodley in that regard. But his wrestling is very important because in the UFC's lightweight division, you have to be good at wrestling, at least in some way. Historically, lots of champions have been wrestlers. The top 10's filled with wrestlers. The current top 10 has, well, I mean, the champion, Khabib Nurmagomedov. We have Ali Quintas, number 10, very good wrestler. We have Justin Gaethje, another Division I wrestler. I think he was an All-American, could be mistaken there, but very good wrestler. Uses his wrestling similarly but different in its own way. I mean, he just doesn't wrestle, to be honest. He's just uses the defensive end. And their striking style's obviously different, but they're wrestle boxers in different ways. I'd say Gaethje's maybe more of a wrestle Thai boxer because he TKOs people with leg kicks. But back to the point at hand. The wrestling's very important because if you can't, you're just gonna get exploited. Because even guys that aren't historically wrestlers like Charles Oliveira has learned effectively how to wrestle people. He is a jiu-jitsu player who has focused a lot of his game on being in top position and wrestling to get his fights going, because otherwise he was struggling because his striking wasn't the best, but he's also worked on that. Again, note, he's much better now. The point remains, you have to be a high-level wrestler in some capacity. Even guys like Kevin Lee that are on the outside of the top 10, it seems, still wonderfully good wrestlers. High-level, super great MMA wrestlers. If you can't do that, people are gonna exploit it and they're gonna get on top of you and dominate. How does Michael Chandler fight generally? He's going to push the pressure a lot. He counters, but he's not going to be on the back foot as much. He's going to feint a lot, and he's gonna put you on the back step. He likes to corner guys, right? And use his speed when you're cornered to take advantage of that. And he's so powerful. I think what he knocked Benson Henderson out was actually an uppercut after he feinted, which is insane how hard he hit him. It was astounding. If you've seen plenty of Chandler's fights, he has loads of power. He's methodical, and I think where we can compare at least older Justin Gaethje to Michael Chandler is Gaethje is, or wasn't, as methodical as Chandler is in how he would set things up. He'd still get caught occasionally, but he was more methodical in how he did it, and he was more specific on how he would isolate fighters. Chandler seemed to look at fights as, this is my biggest strength. If I can corner you and pick you apart with my jab and then overhand and hook, like just, he gets them using his feints, he'd tend to really take over fights on guys, and they would feel his power, and it would usually end in many ways. Occasionally guys could crack back. Again, it happens. Personally, the big issue I see for Michael Chandler, right, is his durability. And I've mentioned this, he's been caught a few times. It's also he's a little bit older. He's gonna be going into the, in my opinion, the toughest division in the UFC, the most dynamic and the most competitive, in the scariest weight class, filled with guys that can crack and knock people out. And his chin, I'm not saying it's gone or anything, no, that's not what I'm saying. But his biggest weakness is getting caught by punches, it seems. That's his biggest weakness. And he's also shown he can take a punch and come back. He has wars that go 5 rounds. Again, nothing against the guy. But it is, in my opinion, the biggest weakness because I don't see many people taking him down outside of maybe Khabib. Not many guys are going to even try and do that. The biggest way you're going to get against him is probably put him on his back foot. And a lot of guys are big enough and have good enough chins and are good enough strikers to do that. So I see that as a major issue for him, right? Not saying he can't, I personally think he'll make it to the top 10 easily, but I think that's gonna be his biggest struggle, personally. But let's look at some matchups, and then we'll break down some comparisons later. So, if Paul Felder isn't retiring, I think this is a wonderful fight to see where Michael Chandler is, because I think Felder's currently still ranked 7th or 8th in lightweight. Clearly a top 10 fighter, can crack, has wonderful striking, very dynamic Muay Thai. I think he might have a Taekwondo based way like as a kid, but he's super dynamic in the kicking game, wonderful Muay Thai, great boxing, incredibly durable. This is something that I think will be a potential struggle for Chandler, is how durable Paul Felder is. I think he's one of the lowest finished fighters. He has some decision losses, but you can see this guy can go and he can fight on the outside with his kicks and distance and measure you, and he can go inside and bang, and he's got super high level power and super durable. Lots of long-winded, wars with Paul Felder where both guys are trying to knock each other silly. And he comes out all right at the end of most of them. I could see Chandler using his wrestling more to try and get Felder on his back, but Felder has shown pretty great wrestling. Obviously, I'd lean Chandler into wrestling for obvious reasons, but this is a fight that would push Chandler in a lot of ways, and if he does get past him, I think we'll learn a lot about the potential of him. Now, if you don't get through Felder, he's gonna have a lot of issues with the guys that come after Felder, because a lot of them are similar to Felder in some ways and have power like him, have the rest, like, I'm not calling Felder a gatekeeper, but if he struggles with him, I'm not using MMA math. You're gonna have a lot of problems with who comes after him. Like, I think it's a good test fight, because automatically he's gonna probably get a top 10 fight. I don't think the UFC would legitimize him and immediately give him a championship fight, anything like that. They didn't give Eddie Alvarez that, so I don't see why they would do that for him. Even though personally, I do rate Chandler, even now, more dynamic and more interesting of a fighter than Eddie Alvarez. Nothing against Alvarez, but I like his chances, even though Eddie became champion. Obviously, wonderful fighter. I rate him currently, like, I think he's got a lot more options, and I think the lightweight division is very scary right now. So, since Khabib is aiming for a GSP fight or maybe Conor fight after Gaethje, if he defeats Justin Gaethje, don't know what's going on there. But since Khabib only fights twice a year, maybe, depending on how Ramadan falls, and especially after his father passing, we don't know what's going on with him. We're probably a year away, right? We probably have a year, maybe 2, right? If he's gonna keep fighting, before we see a new title challenger, right? That isn't one of the people I just mentioned. So Chandler coming to the UFC, he's got some opportunities here, like I said with Paul Felder, but another one would be Dustin Poirier and Ferguson. Looks like Dana White has made some statements that it looks like Poirier and Ferguson will fight each other next. So the winner of that, if Chandler doesn't move now and that fight happens relatively soon, or let's say he gets through Felder and that fight happens around the same time, that's another good fight either after or as an opening fight for him. I think it would be a tougher fight to imagine from the UFC using it, because again, it would legitimize him a bit more, because these are both former interim champions and both guys that are clearly top 5 in the division. And I don't know how willing they are to legitimize him like that. I know they gave Eddie Alvarez, I believe, Donald Cerrone in his first fight, which is a super big name fighter, but I don't remember him being top 5 at the time. I don't think he was close to a title shot. Maybe my memory is hazy of that period, but I don't think they'll do that. Give the Bellator guys a rough go of it. Usually they haven't been super successful at getting to a title shot. Few have, obviously. Some have become champion, like Eddie Alvarez. But they usually like to give him a hard road, so I'd imagine that would be a harder fight to get. But I think it's an interesting fight considering the problems he would give to Poirier and Ferguson, in that he's probably a much faster fighter, has similar or more power than them, Poirier being the heavier puncher of the two. But Chandler would probably have a decent speed and power advantage over both of them, but he would be shorter, but he would also have a pretty significant general wrestling advantage. I could see Chandler knocking both of them out, like theoretically. I still favor both of them, but I see him more likely being able to use his strengths of speed and power over them than I would say Felder, even though they're higher ranked and I would favor them as well. It would be tough, but I could see those, at least in the first round or two, those would be interesting. Now going forward, I would struggle to see that. And I think he's more likely to get a decision over someone like Felder than them. But again, interesting fight. Okay, I want to do the Justin Gaethje comparison real quick right now. If Chandler were to somehow get a fight with Justin Gaethje, it would be chaos. But I want to compare more, before I get into that, their styles and how I see Chandler having a road similar to Gaethje's in a way if he is smart about it, right? He's older than Gaethje. But to contrast it, Gaethje is maybe the most durable man at lightweight. The only other person comparable, probably Tony Ferguson, who he finished. And he's gotten more methodical in his last couple fights. But Gaethje, as we all know, is known as chaos, fights for the knockout. And even in the Ferguson fight, fought for it, just smarter. But you see his style as a wrestle boxer or wrestle Thai boxer, because he loves the leg kick. And you can see his way of pressuring guys, which is something that Chandler likes to do. If Chandler's smart and he doesn't go into just the earlier Gaethje kind of fights and just windmills and phone booth fights, there's a way he can do it with good matchmaking and being strategic and a little luck. He could take that path, but the biggest difference between them, and something you even saw in the Ferguson fight, even with him playing it smarter, is his durability. Gaethje has taken lots of damage, right? But in his early career, before he got to the PFL, he was finishing guys a lot. And even in the PFL, yeah, he had wars. The Luis Palomino and Justin Gaethje fight, that was a crazy war, but there's loads of fight where Gaethje just finishes people. In his UFC career, he's had lots of wars. He's getting better at that. Chandler has to avoid that. You can follow that formula of pressure, corner them in the cage, and bamboozle them. And he can definitely threaten some of his wrestling, with Gaethje doesn't do. But he's got an opportunity there to use that as a example, not of always how to fight, but how to attack some of these lightweight fighters with some comparable strategies. How would a fight between them go? Now, personally, I think this is where we start to see Chandler kind of struggle. Now, obviously, could become champion. Theoretically, anything could happen. If he were to get past some of the people I've mentioned, I feel like someone like Gaethje is just better at pretty much everything other than maybe pure hand speed and maybe pure power. Even then, I think Justin Gaethje hits really damn hard. But I think Chandler might have a slight speed advantage and maybe a pure wrestling advantage slightly. Everything that Michael Chandler might have an advantage in, I think, is marginal, but everything that Gaethje has an advantage in is somewhat substantial. So once he gets there, again, Gaethje's the #2 lightweight in the world right now, so losing him isn't very bad, but I think once you get there, it's gonna be a rough go of it. I think Gaethje's able to work around his speed, corner him, use his leg kicks, and if it gets into a phone booth kind of fight, I'm taking Gaethje. And if stuff gets ugly, I'm taking Justin Gaethje. Justin Gaethje is the best pocket fighter in the UFC probably, if not just lightweight. He's so good at it when he's on. Well, let's move to Khabib. Let's say he gets all the way to Khabib. Let's say Gaethje loses to Khabib and somehow Michael Chandler gets to a title shot with Khabib. People seem to think that wrestle boxers are the answer to Khabib. And I kind of get it, considering the most successful person against Khabib in recent history has technically been Michael Johnson, maybe? Because he like hit him that one time and it was like, whoa! And Khabib was like, never mind, Russian Super King, and just like robot killed him. And I think Chandler has enough power and speed and a good enough wrestling to at least stop some takedowns that he could be problematic, but if he gets Chandler down once, it's over. Khabib, I mean, I know I'm biased, but man, that's a rough go of it. Even if I were to completely admit that wrestle boxers are the key to Khabib, when I'm not actually sure, I actually think Khabib's biggest threat in the lightweight division right now, if the guy peaks, is Charles Oliveira. He is the only guy I think that can submit Khabib, because people said it was Tony Ferguson. I love Tony Ferguson. I don't think he was gonna submit Khabib. I think Khabib was gonna maul him. People disagree, that's fine. And I love Tony, love to see the fight. Love for him to prove me wrong, theoretically. But I think Oliveira is gaining at such a fast rate. He is a scarier fight for Khabib. So I don't see the comparison to wrestle boxers as much, but I will admit the most success anyone's had is being a wrestle boxer. It also helps that most of the lightweight division is a wrestle boxer, so they all use that strategy. But yeah, Chandler personally probably gets TKO'd or submitted, in my opinion. Would be good though. With that said, I absolutely love Michael Chandler. I like his style. He seems like a dope guy. Like, his style's fun. No matter if he could get to championship level, right? No matter, being top 10 means you're like truly elite, right? Like, he's clearly a super elite fighter, super fun. So what he does, right, is he does something more than I think Eddie Alvarez did, than a lot of guys who come over to lightweight from other organizations, is his style is going to, while it's similar, he's going to add some matchups that are so fun for this weight class. Like, even guys I don't think they'll theoretically match him with, but imagine a Dariush fight. Imagine an Ally Quinta fight. He makes lots of fights fun that you don't imagine them being fun. And he's at 34, he's only probably got 3 to 5 years left, if that, right, to be like truly elite. I mean, prove me wrong, man, do it. I'm just saying, with what we've seen in fighters' bodies, it seems to be that's gonna be towards the end of it, right? And he's had some injuries, so it's not like he's come out of, he's had wars and he's had some pretty bad injuries, for at least when I can tell. So I say he's got 3 to 5 years left of good matchmaking if he goes in hard. He gives a lot of fighters some new fights that would be fun, changes the look of it. He could throw the lightweight top 10 into chaos and it would be really, really fun to see. And at the very least, he'd be terribly entertaining. And he's, again, seems like a good guy. Why don't we want good people? We just want him in our sport, period. Go Bellator. But I mean, if he's gonna leave, welcome him in. So yeah, I'm happy with him coming over if he comes. So yeah, how would he do? He'd do pretty damn well. Boom. That's my review. 10 gold stars.